Many of the teachers that are currently in the system in South Africa will retire in the next 10 years. That's according to the recent 2030 Reading Panel's 2021 background report, which suggests that 45% of aging public school teachers will exit the profession. There are suggestions that action needs to be taken to ensure that there are more teachers that are trained. This is to avoid overcrowding of learners in classes and unqualified teachers in the education system. Let's get you more detail on this. We're joined by Jeremy Gibbon, Director for Programs at Gerwel Fellowship. Thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon, Jeremy. So you say that we may find the same as the ESCOM load shedding crisis that we find ourselves happening in the education system by 2030-2015. How did you come to this conclusion?
This research is based on work out of Stellenbosch University, the Research on Socio-Economic Policy Group, and in particular Savas van der Berg, Martin Gustafsson and Kobus Berger. And they've been tracking the age profile, the demographic profile of teachers who are employed in government schools by the government, so public school teachers. And there is this incredible profile that shows that almost half of our teachers are currently in their 50s, which means in the next 10 years they will retire. And we're going to have to replace them with new graduate teachers at a rate that we've never been able to do in the past. And so this is, at one level, it's a crisis, but at the Gerwel Fellowship, we look in, along with a number of other partners involved, as possibly one of the greatest opportunities that our generation is going to face. And we're excited about how we can play a role in that.
Sure, never let a good crisis go to waste. However, Jeremy, we do know, though, in the research that there's a poor uptake of teaching as a career of choice. How much of a spanner in the works does this present?
There certainly is, Dudu, and it's a massive challenge. I don't want to for 1 minute underestimate it. The OECD survey recently indicated that almost half of our teachers currently in the system regard teaching as not their first choice career, and that's traumatic. As a parent with school-going children, it's a very personal thing for me who teaches my children, and I imagine for every parent in this country, we are wanting the very, very best people to become teachers. And at the moment, that's not necessarily happening, and that's where we feel the challenge is. There's no reason why that can't be turned around. In our own small way, Gerwel Fellowship is managing to attract the most remarkably talented young people into the profession. And we do that through a variety of different ways, but the reality is it can be done, and it must be done. If we're going to address this crisis, if we're going to turn it into one of the greatest opportunities that our generation has, we need to be attracting the very best people into teaching and into education, and I think we can. It's an amazing career. It's an incredible way to address deep socioeconomic issues within our country, to push forward the social justice agenda, and we're seeing an increasing uptake in the number of graduates who are interested in coming into the teaching profession.
Yeah, I do wonder then how long that lasts, right? So you also have the belief that the younger teacher cohort needs to be included in solving challenges in the education system. Then they come in the education system, and then they get the shock of their lives, because as we're all aware that, not everything is hunky-dory in this sector, and then they leave because there's also a high turnaround.
Absolutely, spot on. There's no doubt that it's a challenging place to work, but that's the place where we can have the greatest impact. And the way we look in at this particular issue is that the quality of the teacher is the single biggest factor impacting on learner outcomes. I was a high school principal for many years, and I knew at my school that I led that we had to do a whole lot of stuff to support teachers. Leadership was important, infrastructure, etc. But at the end of the day, what happened behind the door that was closed for the 45-minute lesson, the quality of that interaction determined the quality of the schooling that the children were receiving. And so that's what we're focusing on. How can we improve the entire system by improving the quality of the teachers? Because the schools can and will be turned around by the quality of leadership and the quality of teachers. And so we need to attract the best people into teaching. It needs to become a national imperative that we look for the very best to teach our children, and we then work really hard with them to develop them into the best teachers that they can be. You mentioned a number of people, the high rate of turnover of teachers. Gerwel Fellowship has identified that newly qualified teacher space, the first 2 years of teaching, as a critical inflection point. And so we've developed a specific program to support teachers in those first 2 years. The DBE has identified that as a priority as well, and indicated the need to support teachers in those 2 years, and there are other organizations doing a similar thing. And if we can support them in those first 2 years, then we believe that they can go on that sound platform to be expert teachers, some to become education leaders, who are able to then innovate and drive change in our system.
Yeah. Maybe finally, Jeremy, then what role do we play? So you and I, the everyday South African, right? So it's one thing to say, oh, it's not hunky-dory, but it's another thing then for us to step up and maybe start from a home level. I asked maybe in particular because of this issue of bullying, right? So not just bullying amongst peers, but bullying of teachers, which also might have, a deterring or deterrent effect on potentials who are looking to get into the system.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great schools operate off a triangular relationship between the learner, the teacher in the school, and the family, the caregivers, the guardians, the parents. And each member of that group has to play a critical role. Parents need to be supportive of schools. They need to be supportive of teachers. They need to recognize that much of a young person's learning and education starts in the home, reading, language development, etc., and then is deeply supported and led further from the schools. And I think the biggest role that you and I can play at this point is to start to speak about schools and to speak about teaching as the aspirational profession that it certainly has been in our past, and I think needs to become again. When we are engaging with the very best students at schools, when we hear about people winning awards, top awards, somebody's just won the Science Expo, what do we say to those young people? And I think we want to say to them, why don't you become teachers? Why don't you take the gift that you've been given and use it to serve the young people in our country? And so as we engage with school leavers, we talk about future careers and aspirations, along with the important careers such as medicine, engineering, all of those important careers. I want us to talk about teaching as a career in which we can genuinely make a difference. And I think that's the way things are going to turn around.
Yeah, I think if COVID has shown anything is that there's no profession that is not important. But anyway, thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon.